The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
So, when you finish a Masechta in Gemara, so there's a hadrin that we say at the end. And in the hadrin, we say, we're sort of talking to the Gemara, we will not forget you, and you should not forget us, in this world and in the world to come. Okay, so I understand that if I finish Masechta Shabbos, so I'm saying, in the next world, you better stand up there for Masechta Shabbos, I learned you. But what is Masechta Shabbos going to do for you in this world? What does it mean? What does it mean that Masechta Shabbos shouldn't forget me? It's a book. How can it remember me or forget me? This is a crazy story. He says a story like this. This is written in a book, Elena L'Shabeach, and it's actually was said by Rabbi Mordechai Ezrachi, who I just saw. He was actually by my daughter's wedding. He's Rosh Hashiva of Ateret Yisrael in Israel. And he asked this question, and they asked him this question: what does that mean that the Masechta, right, shouldn't forget you in this world? He said the following story. He said that he heard this from Rosh Hashiva, that he heard it from the person who witnessed it firsthand. He said in the town of Mir, in Poland, there was a big tzaddik, big Talmid Chacham. His name was Rav Aaron, and he used to sit all day long in the Beis Medrash, and he learned Torah from morning to night, and he had a chavrusa. Chavrusa's name was Rav Nachum. So these two used to learn together, but Rav Aaron never left the Beis Medrash to go home for lunch. Instead, someone would bring him food. He would go home at night, but the whole day he wouldn't even leave for lunch. Someone would bring him food for lunch. One day, Rav Nachum, his chavrusa, Rav Aaron's chavrusa, became very ill, and his condition was critical. So the guy who used to bring lunch to Rav Aaron came to the shul to bring him lunch, and the doors were locked. Now the doors to the Beis Medrash were never locked, so he couldn't understand what's Rav Aaron doing in there. He doesn't want anyone to see. So he climbed up on a ladder because he had lunch. He wanted to get it to him. He climbed up on a ladder and he looked through the window to see what's going on in the Beis Medrash. Listen to this. So he says he looked into the window in the Beis Medrash, and he saw Rav Aaron was standing in front of the Aron HaKodesh where the Sifrei Torah were, and the Aron HaKodesh was open. And he was screaming, Masechtas Bava Kama, he was screaming at the Gemara, Masechtas Bava Kama, how are you going to let my chavrusa be sick? Masechtas Yuma, how can you forget all the time? The two of us learned you. Masechtas Bava Metzia, have you forgotten? Just because he's sick, you forgot about him? Right? We learned together, we learned you so many times together. He was talking to the Masechtas with the Aron HaKodesh open, screaming. And he said he was watching this, it was like a weird thing to watch. The Rav he's yelling, he's talking to books. He's like, how could you forget us? We used to learn you. And how are you letting him be sick? He used to learn you all the time with me. He says, and Rav Nachum completely recovered. He says, so we see from here that there is such a thing as a Masechta, not forgetting the person who learned it and toiled over it. And I know of such a story with Shmuel Birnbaum, but there's a Gemara, and the Gemara says a very, very famous story, that this person who used to learn one tractate of Gemara all the time, Masechtas Chagiga. It's a very famous story. And that's what he learned all the time, over and over and over. We learned Daf Yomi, we learned many Masechtas. This was his Masechta, he owned it. He knew it by heart, he learned it, this was his baby, Masechtas Chagiga. The Gemara says the story. When he died, so they were going to the Levaya, and there was a woman that was following the funeral dressed in black. And everyone knew each other in the town. This woman was dressed in black. Who is she? They didn't recognize, whatever it is. So after they buried him, the Rav of the town went over to her and said, I saw you in Levaya. How do you know the person who died? What's your name? Who are you? She said, I'm a Masechtas Chagiga. It's in the Gemara. And since he learnt me all the time and he knew me so well, I came from the other world to the Levaya, I'm out of here. And she disappeared, and that was it. He owned that Masechta, was something that he learned.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org